What is up, fellow nerds, and welcome back to the Dapper Snapper Gaming channel, and welcome back to How Do I Want to Do This? This is our series where we take a look at all playable options available to players in Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition, then we rank them on a scale of 1 to 10 and either build them or fix them depending on how they rank. Now today we are beginning our dive into the subclasses of the Ranger class in Dungeons & Dragons, and I am very excited to start off with the one, the only, the classic, the Beastmaster. Now, of course, this has been changed over the years, and so we are going to be looking at the new version today, but let's see if that improvement makes it a little bit more viable than what it was before. Before we do that though, make sure to leave a like on the video and subscribe if you haven't already. As you can see, most people who watch the channel are not subscribed, so please, less than 10% of people, come on, where are you at? Let's do this. Come on, subscribe, and that way we can get to our goal of 4,000 by the end of this year. I think we can do it. But of course, I need your help in order to do that. Then of course, make sure to click that bell so you're notified when new videos are uploaded, and share the video with your friends. So when you think of what a ranger is, right, you definitely think of having an animal companion, right? I think that this is a very natural way to incorporate the ranger, and to have a subclass that's like this makes complete sense. Obviously, this was made very famous in Critical Role's campaign 1, so that's definitely something to look at there if you haven't checked that out, or the Amazon series. All of that is great. But basically you have an animal companion that helps you and fights alongside you and that kind of thing. But is it effective? We're gonna have to find out. So starting off at level 3, we get what's called Primal Companion. Now this originally was called Ranger's Companion, and I'll run through this really quickly, but we're not gonna be ranking this, and I wanna talk about the flaws that are part of that original version from the player's handbook, and then how they sought to fix them in the new version, and then we'll kind of see what where we're at with that. So with this, you could, seek out a beast that was 1/4 CR or less and no larger than medium size, and you could make that into your beast companion. You can then add your proficiency bonus to its AC, attack rolls, damage rolls, saving throws, a bunch of different things. Its hit point maximum would of course scale up with you as well, so that it gets a little bit tougher and more difficult to take out. It would of course obey your commands and works on your initiative. It used the old companion rules before those were updated in Tasha's. However, one of the biggest issues with this is that you had to use your action to command it to do something. So if it wanted to attack, dash, disengage, or help, you had to tell it to do so, and that took your action, which is incredibly taxing, right? So let's say you've got a wolf, right? A basic wolf, or just some other really small type of creature here. You could use your action to tell it to attack once. Well, by level 5, that's completely irrelevant because you have multi-attack, you have extra attack, and so that just doesn't matter, right? So then they said, well, if you do have that extra attack, then you can make one, and then your beast could make one, but even then you're probably going to be dealing more damage than your beast. So even then, it's probably not that great. If we are incapacitated, it acts on its own and protects you and that kind of thing. And then if it dies, you can spend 8 hours bonding to another beast that you have to go out and find. So let's talk about what issues there are with this, so that we can effectively see what was needing to be fixed when they did a rewrite, right? Number 1, you have to go find a beast. Right, it isn't something that's just there, right? It's not like your summons, like what we did with the Wildfire Druid, right? I'll put that up in the icon above. Wildfire Druid just summons things, right? And you can even check that out in when I did my build for that. When I did basically the Pokemon trainer, and you have all your friends, you have all these ways of just summoning, right? And these things show up. Whereas with this, you have to actually go out and find something and befriend it and all this stuff, which is fine. I'm not saying that this is a bad thing to have that journey. However, when that beast dies, it's gone. It is completely gone, and you've got to go find a new one. So yeah, you had this whole arc of becoming friends with this animal and upgrading it and all this stuff, and then it dies, it's over. You have to go start completely from scratch again, which is very unsatisfying in my opinion. I think that that's terrible. But then you have to spend 8 hours bonding to a new one, and you start the whole process over again, right? I think that's problematic. I think that's one of the biggest issues, and that leads to a lot of player frustration. The other thing is having to use my action in order to tell it what to do. This is based very much on the old way that D&D worked when Player's Handbook first came out, was using your action was really necessary for this kind of thing. Power creep has obviously changed over time to where a lot of these commands have moved to either a bonus action or a free action. And so obviously it could use an update in that way as well. Being able to use one of your attacks on your extra attack feature, maybe it's okay, but I don't know. I feel like it could definitely be better in that way too. So a few issues that we seek to fix here. And so I think we've got a lot of room for improvement. So let's take a look at what Primal Companion offers us. So with this, we can magically summon a primal beast. We're already off to a good start there, and it is friendly to us and of course obeys our commands. We then choose one of the 3 provided stat blocks: Beast of the Land, the Sea, or the Sky, which uses our proficiency bonus in several places. In combat, it acts during our turn, and it can move and use its reaction on its own, but only action it can take is the dodge action unless we use our, wait for it, bonus action to command it. Big shift, huge improvement. Then of course it tells us that we can sacrifice one of our attacks in order to let it take the attack action. Now, one thing to keep in mind here, now that we've had that shift, is that just because you can do one or the other doesn't mean that you can do both. So if you do give up one of those attacks in order for your companion to make an attack, you don't get to do that again on your bonus action. It's letting it take the attack action. So I mean, that does mean that once it gets multi-attack later on, that when you give up one of your attacks, it will get 2, or you can of course on the bonus action allow it to make 2 in that case as well. So maybe there's an argument to be made there depending on how much damage you're doing, but typically you're probably just going to want to maintain making your own attack action. It just really depends on positioning. If the beast has died within the last hour, you can use your action to touch it and expend a spell slot of 1st level or higher, and it returns to life with all of its hit points restored after 1 minute. That's another big improvement. When you finish a long rest, you can summon a different primal beast. The new beast appears in an unoccupied space next to you, and you choose its stat block and appearance. If you already have one, it vanishes and a new one shows up. It also vanishes if you die. So there's a lot of good that comes out of this, right? We've shifted everything to a bonus action, which is amazing for our action economy, right? So now we can say, I make my attack, I make my extra attack, and then you on top of that can tell it what to do, and then it can attack as well. So that's a huge improvement, right? And so you can get your dashes, your disengages, you can have all of that stuff on your bonus action, and that makes it a lot more potent and makes you feel like you're not wasting a bunch of turns. So huge improvement there. I love that. And so then let's take a look at these stat blocks and see if anything is kind of weird about it. So we'll start with the land stat block. So I've got that up on the screen for you. So it's pretty basic. We've got a 13 AC plus our proficiency bonus. Hit points are just 5 plus 5 times the ranger level. And then the stats are fine for something like this. It's okay. Has dark vision. It gets a charge feature, so if it runs 20 feet at something and makes its normal maul attack, it does a little bit of extra damage and could knock something prone, which is good. So you know, that's fine. It deals 1d8 plus 2 plus proficiency bonus, which is okay. I mean, like I said, I don't think that the primary focus with these is to be necessarily attacking. I think that it should be used for other utility, and we'll talk about that as we go a little further. As we go to the sea, the one thing that's a problem with this one is that it's really not usable on land. It has a 5-foot move speed on land, but it has a 60-foot swim. So if it's not in the water, you're probably not going to want to use this. So be careful when you choose something like this. But of course it gets binding strike, which isn't too bad. So it deals that 1d6 plus 2 plus proficiency bonus, and it can either be piercing or bludgeoning, which is pretty cool. And the target is grappled. Its strength isn't the best, so you will probably see a lot of things escape when we only have a 14 strength, but still that can be helpful. It's definitely not terrible. And finally, Beast of the Sky. Now, one thing that sets this apart is that this is actually a small beast rather than medium like the other two, and it has less hit points. Its strength is also 6, which is really bad. However, it does pick up the flyby feature, which is pretty good. Flyby is, of course, what makes the owl an amazing familiar, in that it doesn't take opportunity attacks when it flies out of the enemy's reach. So this gives you basically a free familiar that you could send as your bonus action to go take the help action and then get back out of there without taking an opportunity attack. So that can be quite helpful. I think that that's really, really great. So there's definitely something to this. There is an issue that I have with this, that the old system was able to capture that this one is not. And that is the features of unique beasts. While they were CR 1/4 or below, which is very low, there are still some things that fall into that range that have some really unique features. I'll just name a couple of examples here, but there are several. Number one, the giant crab is an interesting one because of how tanky it can be. It's got a decent AC for something like this. And yeah, the damage isn't crazy, but I mean, it gets an automatic grapple though. And so yes, that's kind of carried over into the Beast of the Sea, but the crab isn't limited to that. And so it has a 30-foot walk and swim speed. So that's a little bit better in the way that I see that. You've also got the giant poisonous snake, which has a 10-foot reach and also can deal poison damage. It has blind sight out to 10 feet, which is also quite good. So that's a thing. And then finally, there's just the normal wolf, right? The normal wolf sounds boring, but pack tactics. Pack tactics is huge, and you have the ability to possibly knock people prone. So there are all of these unique abilities that I see with these individual beasts that cannot be carried over on something that is just this generic stat block. And that's, I think, where we see the biggest problem with this update, is that you lose a lot of the heart of what this was in having a unique animal companion. You end up with generic animal. So yes, you have more options of what you can have, but ultimately it loses its uniqueness. At least that's the way that I see it. To me, when I look at this the modern way, I have had this, and what I do is I look at the original creature, and if it had other features, a lot of times I'll end up replacing them and leave some of the other like scaling factors and that kind of thing. So I end up having to homebrew stuff in order to make sure that my player feels like the choice actually mattered when that person chose to summon a creature, right? That's the biggest thing that I have with this. And I feel like that's a pretty major gripe in my opinion. However, there is a lot of good here, right? We can summon it, we can bring it back to life with just one spell slot of any level, which is great. We've shifted to a bonus action, which is also really good. And we, of course, get it back whenever we finish a long rest regardless. We don't have to go out into the woods and find something and blah, 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 and slow down the story. So for all of those reasons, there's a lot of good, but there's one really major bad that I can't quite get over that, and it really costs several points here, just because it's not just about power, it's really also about player experience, and running it as written is, to me anyway, is very disappointing on the player side. So for all of that, I'm going to give this a 7 out of 10. I'm sure that you will disagree with me, at least some of you in the comments down below, and that's fine. I would love to have an open discussion about this, because I do think that this is kind of a touchy subject for a lot of people, because this is a quintessential subclass. This subclass absolutely needs to exist. It's very important for it to exist, because so many people love this kind of an archetype. However, I think we've slightly missed the mark here, and the way that I would have fixed it is that you have this generic stat block, whether something already has a swim or flying speed, and then if you want to pick and choose things from the template, you can replace those things. And if you want to keep things from the old stat block, then you can do that as well. That's what I think would help a lot. So like, you know, for this, you've got a 40-foot normal speed and 40-foot climb speed. You would keep that as long as it makes sense, right? If you have like a bear, I don't know if climbing up a rock is great. Climbing a tree makes sense. Climbing a rock, I don't know. And so you kind of need to talk to your DM about these kind of things so that it makes sense. So I do think that it's fine, like it's okay, but I think it requires a little bit of homebrew in order to make sure that everyone's going to be happy with it. At level 7, we get exceptional training, and at this point we start having a bit of an issue where we've corrected something now with the new version, and so now it actually makes us lose a little bit of value in these future features. So let's take a look at that. So with this, we can now, as this reads, we can now use our bonus action to command the beast to dash, disengage, or help on its turn as long as it didn't attack. Then, in addition, the beast's attacks now count as magical for the purposes of overcoming resistance and immunity to non-magical attacks and damage. Now, the second half of this is fantastic, and we'll come back to that. However, the first half basically gets thrown out the window because we've already got that now from the new way that we are looking at things. And so now we're beginning to lose some value here because we already have that, right? Now, is it a bad thing that we already have that? No, I would not give that up so that I have to wait until 7th level. Waiting till 7th level would suck. And that's kind of the biggest reason why this thing is a problem. And even then it says when it doesn't attack, then you can do that. No, you can already do that as a bonus action. You can do that regardless of whether it attacked on its turn or not. You can still do that, right? You can replace one of your attacks, then you can take your bonus action and it can dash, disengage, whatever. That's totally allowed now. And so you basically have to throw out the first half of this feature because it actually takes you backwards. So with this, we now get to overcome non-magical resistance. That is huge, right? Especially at 7th level. That's a really good time to be getting something like this. Very, very impactful. This is a 9 out of 10, easy. I don't think it's any lower. You could probably even convince me to go to a 10, to be honest. This is amazing because it is able to get past one of the most common resistances out there and one of the biggest problems for companions. It's also what makes the Moon Druid, up an card above, so good, is that you get this for your wild shapes. So yeah, you're going to see me comparing Druid to Ranger a lot. This is one of those too, where you've got a beast that normally doesn't do all that much damage if you're making it attack at all. But if you do, you want to make sure it counts, right? It's not going to count if it's resisted or immune to everything, right? This allows you to get around that. So very valuable feature. I definitely need that. Ignore that first half. At level 11, we get Bestial Fury, and this basically gives multi-attack to whatever creature that we have. So this obviously has some old wording in it where it gives multi-attack to if your beast that you chose earlier, with the old feature didn't have it, then you gain it or whatever. This applies just as much to the new version as it does the old. This, of course, allows you to make 2 attacks instead of 1 when you command the ally to do that. This, of course, means that when you say as a bonus action to make an attack, it now makes 2 attacks. So technically, you could have your companion make 3 attacks in 1 turn because you can give up 1 attack and then it now has multi-attack. Is that what you want to do? Probably not, because you're probably dealing a lot more damage than it does. But maybe it's in a position to where you need to, I don't know. I don't think that you're going to use this all that much, just because I'm limited in how much damage this is going to do. It just doesn't scale all that well, unfortunately. So that's a bit of a problem. So I've got to give this another 7 out of 10. Like, it's fine, it's okay. It does improve things technically, but is it in a way that I'm going to always want to use? Probably not. Finally, at level 15, we get share spells, and so this is very basic, but also quite effective. Whenever we cast a spell that affects ourselves, then we can also target the beast companion with the spell as long as it is within 30 feet of you. So this brings to mind a few different spells, such as Cure Wounds being the obvious one, right? You can heal yourself and then it also heals your companion. But you've also got things like Freedom of Movement, which could work out, which I believe you would have at this level. So that's a thing. Maybe even Stone Skin is interesting. Is it worth taking these spells just so that you can have a beast that's resistant to non-magical stuff? Maybe. I don't know. It just really depends on your situation. It certainly would make it a lot more tanky, while also making you a lot more tanky. So I don't know. I feel like there might be something to this. Is this the best capstone out there? I don't necessarily think so, just because we are limited in the ranger spell list. Of course, we're a half caster, and so we don't have the most amazing options. But there are definitely some that stand out here and could absolutely make you and your companion that much more effective. So for that reason, I'm going to give this an 8 out of 10. I don't think that this is necessarily terrible or bad. I think it's decent, right? But ultimately, again, I just don't know if our companion is going to be tough enough to where these are necessarily going to make a huge impact overall. So what do we think of the overall package for this? This is a tough one because I really do like this subclass. I really do like it. I think it's a lot of fun. I think that a lot of people really love this subclass, and I think it's a worthy addition to D&D. However, I do think that even after the updates, it is still flawed in a few ways, and I just don't think that the damage numbers scale nearly enough to where it's worth me giving up an attack, where it's worth me really putting it in all that much danger, unless I'm using it for the flyby feature with our Beast of the Sky. And at that point, I feel like I'm not unique enough to where it makes a huge difference, right? I might as well just get Magic Initiate or even Ritual Caster and just get Find Familiar and do the same thing, right? So that's kind of hard. I think that there's definitely some value in the flexibility of having the land and the sea over what Find Familiar would. I definitely can see that being a good thing. But ultimately, I don't know that I could give this an insanely high ranking. Is it a bad subclass? No, I don't think so. Do I think that it needs another rework? I don't know. I don't think that I am going to rank it low enough to where it needs a rework, at least for my purposes. But it's going to be pretty close. I'm going to give this a 6 out of 10, which is the lowest ranking that you can have and still make it and still not have to have a fix. Ultimately, this subclass relies super heavily on a core feature here that just doesn't scale all that well. Having a companion is nice, but you don't get a lot of the great defensive features that come with something like the Artificer Battlesmith. You don't get any of the extra features such as the old way of it having like pack tactics, or it being able to protect you in any certain way that is unique to this subclass. It's all very generic, and it just doesn't feel, it just feels kind of lifeless, right? And so I don't really like how they have chosen to execute this new way. I think that there is a much better way to do it. I don't know the way on this one necessarily, but I do think that it could be a little bit better. However, with all of that, it did technically pass our ranking system. So we are going to be building one later this week, and I'm going to see if I can't take some scaling up on this thing through some obvious multi-classing. So I hope you guys are looking forward to that. Make sure that you are subscribed so you don't miss when that comes out. Make sure that you've left a like on the video, and make sure to check out my Pokemon content as well. We are in the midst of a Pokemon draft league right now, and we are currently 2-0. So go over there and support that draft league content. It's basically fantasy football, but for Pokemon. It's a great time, so make sure to check that out, of course. Until next time, stay safe out there. We'll see you later. Bye-bye.